So fresh off of practice, B practice was this morning, A practice has just been happening. We've been having a little look at a section, but first of all, let's give you a full rundown of the track, because I can kind of remember it all because I've been riding. So, in the start gate, nice view, lovely. Dive in and immediately it gets rocky, really drifty, awkward left-hander that you just feel like the front wheel's going to slip out on, and then a rock garden. There's about 4 lines in it, but the best line for the turn after it is to go as wide as possible. Looks easy when you see people doing it, but it's actually like a good, decent, maybe like 8-foot gap pulling off of nothing over really sharp rocks that will destroy wheels. Then after that, nice corner, traversing along, natural step down, then new taping. The old track went kind of like on a shape like this, and they put the peg there, so you have to go in the grass around the outside. There's 2 setups, like a higher one where it's more off camera and harder to slow down, and a lower one where you have to kind of scoop up. But it's easier to control the speed for, even though it makes it a bit tighter. Then the next straight, it's in the shadow and it's a little bit greasy because all that moisture from the grass gets dragged down the next straight. And after that you get into the open section, which you should see in the live feed, and you got those wide open turns, beautiful, just flowing down the hill, but the taping is so wide that now people can fully inside them. They tried to do this in years past. They taped it even more inside this year, and now most people are doing it. We were going to ghost this section, but most people are doing it, so it's not the best comparison. Do those open turns, most people will be doing the insides, and then it gets super fast, really fast right-hand berm, which is starting to get some holes in it. I'm like switching my line about on it, trying to spot the kind of smoothest way through, and then big step down into that famous like wide open section. And you come in, there's a higher line, you scrub over a crest, and then that flat out left berm, which each morning they sweep all the rubble off so riders can inside it. I'm just going to stick with the outside because a lot of rubble ends up on that inside and it makes it a little bit sketchy. So you're trying to stay off the brakes as much as possible, speed tucking down into the step up, and then it's really hard to clear. You gotta go flat out, step up and then back into the trees. Small double, and then you got hard on the brakes and it's all slippy and greasy in there because again it's in the shadows. There's some roots and there's some stumps, and there's a few different options. A lot of riders are going over that first stump that takes a lot of effort to really soak up. If you hit it too fast, you land too deep and it just messes up the next ones. So you can set up a little bit wider and go round that first stump, but like a carpet of roots that's really tricky to brake and corner on. What I'm doing is I'm just gapping the last one, trying to make things easier for myself. And after that, small straight under the bridge, which when I was track walking, I was really worried I was going to hit my head off because it's really low, but you're leaning over so much in the turn, it's actually fine. And then you get a really awkward, rocky kind of triple thing, and you can jump the whole thing, which is fine, but then the corner after it's flat with rocks in it, and you're landing and braking and turning, and it's really tricky not to wash the front wheel. So after that you pop out into the jump section, which is like one of the tracks they have open, and we just did a few of the jumps on this. And it's pretty sick actually, like really nice. I didn't really know how they were going to ride, but they did make the scrub jump a little bit harder to scrub. People used to scrub it to the right, but now there's a big kicker there, so everyone's going to the right side and having to scrub turning to the left. Still pretty cool though, and those jumps, you're just trying to keep them low, speed tuck in, trying to stay out of the wind, and then you get to one of the hardest corners in the track. I don't know if you'll get to see it, but really, really tricky. It's a very mellow left-hander with 3 distinct lines. There's an inside line, which leaves you with a bit of a tight turn at the end. There's a middle line that on the 2 places you want to corner where there's grip, there's little roots leading into them, and they just slip your front wheel. I nearly binned it on it yesterday. A helicopter's just carried Brendan off, and we think that's where he crashed. And it's super hard. And then there's also an outside line, which a bit of a long way around, but there is a bit of support there. Don't think many people are doing it. I'm being extra kind of sneaky, and I'm going right out to the tape. And then I found a little catch you can hit to just try and straighten things out, because you've got to carry speed out of it because it's slightly uphill on the way out. Then down into the next section, there's a split between two trees, and then you hit a huge compression into a left before doing an uphill drop. You gotta pedal up this thing. If you get the corner bad, it's actually kind of hard to clear the road gap. So road gap over, and then bam, corner, corner. And then there's a really tricky turn that in years past, everyone was just going low. But now, maybe it's changed a little bit, but there's a high line you can gap up into, which is quite nice, quite supportive. I'm trying that one at the minute. And then after that, we get into the steepest section of the track, which is, I cannot express how steep it is. It is brutal, but it's grippy this year, so it's not too bad. It's been wet in years past, which has made it super sketchy. So now people are coming in, people are gapping in, people are going flat out at it. I'm just being cautious. And there's a few different lines coming in. Really, I don't think it matters too much what line you do down there, because they're all pretty direct. It's just a personal preference thing.
Yes!
Then after that, really awkward right-hander. Lots of little steps, it's narrow against the tree, and it's just a really tricky one before you get to the plunge. And the plunge is that really awkward drop that you'll see riders like almost stopping before, because it's the landing for it is like immediately on the backside. So riders will haul up on the brakes, lift the bike over the edge and try and get back on the ground as soon as possible before a really narrow, tricky right-hander with 3 lines into the kind of wave step down, which is the wooden step down over the road. And inside, terrible line for the corner, but some people end up there by mistake. There's a middle line that works quite well, and a higher line which gives you the best speed carrying into that drop, but it's harder to get on. Do that wave step down, and there's a main line that's a bit rough but nice and supportive, and an inside line which I think most are doing, which is just a more direct route down to the next corner. And that next corner, you slap into that so fast. Be ready to see some shrubs. Yeah! Then tiny little short, weird scrubbing tabletop thing, and then a huge line choice decision. There's like a high to inside or a straight down on a big long berm. When you look at it, inside looks like it'll definitely be better because it's so much shorter, but it's rough and there's some nasty roots on the exit, and it's like a bit of a tight turn to get around the next tree. I don't know which is quicker, but I like the inside because I think shortest route's the best. After that, we get into the section that will be ghosting. So you come down and there's like some hefty compressions that you're just trying to catch backsides and pump and keep things nice and smooth. And then you go over a blind crest, which has some really big break and bump holes. And then it gets rocky. It gets really rocky. There's a wall that is so chunky, and there's some really big compressions. You come into the section, compression, and then you've got a choice. There is some roots that everyone can just ride over without too much drama, but then there's this rock which is like a perfect kicker right where you don't want it to be. And most riders are hitting this rock and just trying to absorb it, just trying to soak it up. But there is a gap to the left of it that you shouldn't be able to ride through, but you can. There's a lot of pedal scraping marks on it, and what you'll see a lot of riders doing is when they take that line, they'll unweight the bike to just lift the pedals up just a few inches just to get clean over those rocks. And doing that just removes an impact that you have to deal with. That is a personal preference choice, doesn't really affect the speed. When you go over that rock, you then have the big choice, which is do you go left or do you go right? There is an inside and an outside, and there's different ways of riding both of them. So the outside line, there's like a slightly lower point in the wall if you set up wider that you can get the wheels down earlier to make the compression not as harsh. But if you go a few inches to the right, there's a higher point that you can launch off. You can even gap down into the next section. There's a down slope that you can catch, but being able to do that at this point in the track is an impressive feat of strength and commitment. Other riders are just going off that point and then just not clearing it and just taking the impact and dealing with it. Then that wider line sets you up really nice for the next corner, nice wide entrance, rail the corner, nice and supportive. And then down the next straight, there are a couple options, but most people are hugging the left-hand side of the track and going over a drop, which you have to turn slightly left of. And there's a little sapling on it that everyone's clipping the pedals on, but luckily not causing any issues. Super blind, and your landing point is about that wide. If you land too far left, you'll go off the track. If you land too far right, there's a huge boulder you're going to smack into. The inside line in this section, so when you come over that first kicky rock, you can go right, and there's a few different ways of doing this. A lot of people will do that and just go straight down, take the impacts of the compressions, and then just T-bone the turn, shralp it. But a few people have come into this inside line a little bit wider and then ridden the inside line diagonally across the rain ruts and getting onto the grass on the inside and then just turning it into one big long corner and then off the next drop. Don't know if it's going to be quicker, but it is shorter. Crucially, it's a lot shorter. So this is a really interesting section with loads of different ways of riding it, and I don't know what's quicker, but I do know the outside line is easier, so that's the line I'm doing. It is ghosting time, ladies and gentlemen, and this is Loris Vergier versus Charlie Hatton. You can see they're both on the wide line, with Charlie pulling ahead and pulling for a gap. He was the only man we saw do that, and it looks like it might have got him a little bit of time on Loris, but they are still very close. There is not much time in them as they head over that blind rise. And you can see coming down into the next section, it's still super close. Who's going to take it? And they come around the turn, and look at that! Loris is past him. So it looks like the speed down into the turn is what won that for Loris by 0.11. Next up, ignore that first rider, we have Dakota Norton and Troy Brosnan, both again on this wider line as most riders were doing it. You can see Dak is slightly in the lead coming through that first drop. And then a little glitch there from the video editor, but we won't stress about that. But look what happens here. Dak swings up to the right and he does that wide line that we saw Greg Menard doing back in 2019. What's it going to do for him coming down into the turn? It's looking super close. So Dak is catching Troy, and at the finish line it is 0.01, nothing. But Dak was carrying a bit more speed there, so might have clinched it if we'd managed to film for a little bit further. Let's compare the fastest two we filmed doing this outside line. So we've got Ronan Dunn hoofing off the drop and Finn Isles just plopping off of it. And look at that, look, Ronan, he's just pulled a bike length and a half just by no breaking it off that drop. Will he keep that gap all the way down? He's going to have to carry the speed over this drop. And Finn, he's not pulling back any yet, but round this turn, what can happen? And looks like Ronan takes this section by half a second, 0.52 over Finn Isles. Let's compare the fastest two on the inside line, which is Reese Wilson and Loic Bruni. So they both come in slightly different lines, and Reese is slightly pulling ahead here. But when they come out from behind the pads, Reese is really pulling ahead. So Bruni must have just tickled the brakes when he was out of sight there, and Reese is off those brakes and carrying speed. Down over that crest, and Reese is definitely holding that gap. And coming up to the finish line, Reese holds it to take it by 0.17 over Bruni. So we know who's fastest on each line, but let's see which line is fastest. Ronan Dunn is sending it into that wide line as Reese is taking that inside. So it's much shorter on the inside, but just look how fast Ronan Dunn is going around that outside line. Where's Reese? There he is, and he's got no chance. Ronan is checking out. He's heading up, he's heading down to the finish. He's gonna get Reese a beer, and he's gonna be waiting for him. And he takes this section by over a second, 1.11. So Reese, if you're watching this, try that outside, honestly. Like, make sure you gap it though. Gap in, and yeah, do that. So the Pinkbike Ghosty of Lenzerheide Award goes to Ronan Dunn. Good lad. So after that, you then go down that straight, and there's a left-hander that's getting really rough. A couple of riders have tried inside in it. Most riders are just going to deal with that roughness and just rail that left. After that, you then have a slight right crest, which just feels sick. You feel like you're just scrubbing off of it, and you step down and then like land right next to the course marker and then cross the tarred road. Most awkward jump in the track. Yeah, most awkward jump in the track. Really short. It's like the speed you're coming in is way too fast for it. So you're trying to like jump it, soak it up, and then lift the bike over the edge of the table to then place it onto the landing. So precise and so hard to do at race pace. Then bike parky turns, a few braking bumps coming in, rail those corners. You're just trying to get off the brakes and carry the speed out of them. Into big step down into the finish, and then the scariest jump in the track. But it's actually okay, it's not too bad. Little brake check though. I don't think you can no brake it. I think you would just land too deep. Then corners, and the last 2 turns before the final drops, they've actually moved the course marker to try and slow riders down coming into the finish, because a lot of riders, myself included, landed really far down the landing at race pace. When you're sprinting in and squash off it, I landed halfway down the landing going off the higher takeoff, and I was like, I'll try the lower takeoff. Came in, pedaled, lower takeoff, landed 3/4 of the way down the landing. So it's just, the landing needed to be a bit further away, or the takeoff's a bit further back, but they're not going to change it now. You take that hit, you land, you scoot through the finish, and that is a full lap of the Lenzerheide downhill track. I really enjoy it. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hopefully I qualified. I feel like I could qualify at this one, and I'm getting really nervous because of it. I thought I had no chance in Maribor, and now I'm feeling all right. So yeah, hopefully I did. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and we will see you tomorrow, where we might be trying something interesting. It could be a story of the race, but it might be something totally different. So you don't want to miss that. Right, I'm off. I need to go and qualify.